Gospel of Matthew begins with a dense genealogical record, tracing a lineage through generations from Abraham downwards. The Gospel of John takes a different approach, opening with cosmic, philosophical poetry regarding the pre-existent Word. But the Gospel of Mark ignores both ancestral history and cosmic prologues to force the reader immediately into the action. This text contains no birth narrative. Instead, it moves directly from the opening line into the adult ministry of Jesus. This creates a hyper-compressed, high-tempo narrative. To understand why it was built this way, we have to look at the specific requirements of its intended audience. We can analyze the Gospel of Mark as a targeted historical document. The traditional author is John Mark, a figure who was not one of the original 12 apostles. He was writing specifically for Gentile Romans living in the capital of the empire. Evidence suggests the text was produced around 64 AD, a period of violent instability in the city of Rome. John Mark engineered this document to ensure that a specific community of Roman Gentiles could maintain their faith during a severe historical crisis. If John Mark was not an eyewitness, where did he find his primary data? Historical records indicate that the Gospel is the codified oral history of the Apostle Peter. We find structural proof in Peter's sermon to the centurion Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. Mapped against the Gospel of Mark, the match is precise. Peter's short speech provides the architectural blueprint for the entire book. John Mark included a detail suggesting his own presence during the narrative's turning point. In Mark 14, as Jesus is arrested in Gethsemane, the text mentions a young man who flees the scene naked, leaving his linen cloth behind. It is a highly specific peripheral detail found in no other gospel. This gospel serves as the deliberate textual preservation of Peter's eyewitness testimony, managed by John Mark. This raises the question of why the testimony was edited into this specific, rapid-fire shape. John Mark wrote for a Roman culture valuing power, pragmatism, and immediate results over abstract philosophy. He stripped away Jewish elements his Roman readers wouldn't care about, specifically lengthy lineages and discursive sermons. He replaced them with a high frequency of action verbs, using the Greek word for immediately dozens of times to maintain a relentless pace. The focus shifted to what Jesus did, miracles and exorcisms, emphasizing displays of authority and strength. Mark also consistently pauses the narrative to translate Aramaic terms and explain Jewish customs, ensuring his foreign readers never lost the thread of the story. Each structural choice was a calibration designed to hold the attention of the Roman mind. Why did John Mark feel the sudden need to write this history down in 64 AD, rather than continuing to rely on oral tradition? To understand the timing, we have to look at the timeline between the crucifixion in 30 AD and the destruction of the Jewish temple in 70 AD. In 64 AD, two massive crises converged on the Christian community in Rome. First, the eyewitness generation was dying. Peter was facing imminent martyrdom, threatening to take the oral history of the faith to the grave. Second, the Emperor Nero began a state-sponsored persecution of Christians in the city. The Roman Christian community was suddenly facing brutal state-sponsored execution in the arena, torn apart by beasts and condemned to agonizing death by fire. Only 6 years later, the destruction of Jerusalem would scatter the original foundation of the faith. John Mark was operating against a brutal deadline. He produced a written record of the faith's origins before the primary witnesses and the city of Jerusalem were gone. The theological core of the gospel is the motif of the servant. In a Roman culture that obsessed over ruling and being served, Mark presented a divine king who arrived to serve as a slave. The book's two-part structure reflects this. The first half establishes Jesus' absolute authority and power through action. The second half shows that same power moving toward the cross and public suffering. This gospel functioned as a survival manual for the Roman Church. It taught people facing their own execution how to endure by looking to a Savior who chose to suffer. We can judge the success of John Mark's engineering by looking at the narrative's climax. The pivotal moment of the gospel occurs at the cross, the second Jesus dies. In a striking irony, the ultimate declaration of Christ's identity is not spoken by a Jewish priest or even a disciple. The realization comes from a Roman centurion, the officer in charge of the execution. Mark 15:39 records his verdict. Truly, this man was the Son of God. John Mark successfully produced a narrative that matched Roman pragmatism. He translated the Jewish Messiah into a savior that the Gentile world could recognize.